Father Seraphim Aldea is a priest monk living on the island of Mull in the Scottish islands of the Hebrides. He was born and raised and educated in Romania. After his early education, he went to England to work on his doctorate at the University of Durham, where he worked on the theology of the great elder Sophrony. Father Seraphim is currently in Scotland establishing the first Orthodox monastery in Scotland in over 1,000 years, and he could use our help. There are links below this video to his website where you can find out how you can help him. He also conducts pilgrimages every summer to Orthodox sites in Scotland, so if you're interested in that, you can find links there too. Father Seraphim also podcasts on Ancient Faith Radio through a Monk's Eyes, which is a podcast I've come to enjoy a great deal. So I hope you'll enjoy this episode from my interview with Hieromonk Seraphim.
Well, I imagine it was about time for an Orthodox monastery to be founded again in those isles, and God didn't find any other idiot willing to do it, so he tricked me into it. That's really the thing I actually believe happened. Like, God looked around and thought, okay, there's no one else available, so you'll have to do. And that comes with lots of advantages, because he knows I'm completely, the wrong person to do it. So he steps in and he helps all the time. I do feel like I'm helped all the time. Everywhere I go, I meet people who, for some reason, like being there. I meet, lovely people who drive me around. I meet people who accommodate me. I'm sure this only happens because God knows, otherwise I wouldn't be able to do it. But the personal answer to that for me would be that I've always, since I've heard of the monastic life, I've always wanted to be as far away as possible and to be surrounded by silence and just, I know it sounds horrible, but it has nothing to do with not loving people. It's just a need I've had. And there are a lot of nuns and monks who have this calling to just be removed in a physical way from people, at least for parts of the year. I need to be physically removed. And I've just searched for that, and I've prayed for that. And then God eventually, through Father Sophrony, really, Saharov, brought this church on an island in my life. I was actually in Father Sophrony's crypt back in 2010 at the very beginning, praying exactly what I've told you, praying for some sort of direction, some sort of just sign which way I should go with my life. I could have went back to Moldavia. I could have stayed somewhere in the UK. I could have come to America. There are wonderful places in the States that I felt I could live there. But one doesn't want, especially a monk or a nun, to just do what feels nice. You do try your best to discern what is God's will for you. So I went to Father Sophrony and I prayed, and I remember telling him, there are two saints that I pray to this way, Saint Seraphim and Father Sophrony, who's a saint to me, so there's no distinction in my mind. I always ask them, please don't speak in metaphors in any way. I don't need signs, I don't need to, because I have an amazing ability to interpret anything in a way that means exactly what I want it to mean. I could go out and I could look at the sky, and if the clouds are set up in a certain way, I'll make sure that actually that means exactly what I want them to mean. And then the risk is that, time goes by and 5 years later, 10 years later, you realize, that wasn't really God's will for me. It was my own will. And that's very disappointing, really. So I went to Father Sophrony and I asked him, I was in his crypt praying to his relics, and I said, please, in a very obvious sort of way, tell me what I need to do. And I got out of the crypt, my phone rang, and the parish priest in Glasgow was on the other end of the line. And he told me there is an abandoned church on the Isle of Mull, of which I'd never heard before, and nobody wants it because the roof is falling down. It's on the western side of an island. It's been abandoned, and there are really no people around. So you can't use it as a parish. It has to be a monastery. And I just said yes on the spot, although I had no idea really what I said yes to. Not only that I didn't know where Mull was located, I didn't know anything about Iona. I didn't know anything about St. Columba, about any of the Celtic saints. So, I wish I had a holier story to say, that God came to me or St. Columba appeared in a vision and called me to the Isles, but nothing like that happened. I just followed in the honesty of my heart what I knew and I still know to be the way forward for me, and God used that to take me where He needs me to be. That's the story, really.
Did anyone have any questions they wanted to ask about that question?
Very practical one, if I could. If you're saying this old church was in total disrepair and whatnot,
Yeah.
What have you been able to do so far? How were you able to do it?
Well, the roof was in a very bad state, and then in November 2013 we had a storm, a particularly bad storm, and some of the trees to the west side of the church actually were broken and they fell over the roof. So I was forced for the next 2 years after that to simply focus exclusively on repairing the roof and making the church weatherproof, windproof, waterproof all over again. And by the grace of God, we've succeeded. But it did set the monastery itself back for at least 2-3 years. It felt like a curse or a sort of a temptation at the beginning, but now I do understand the wisdom of it. Because really, otherwise I would have moved in and I would have done everything you've done here. You set it all up, you have these beautiful floors and the iconostasis and the icons and all of that, and once it's all finished, the roof collapses. So I was actually, it was a blessing in disguise that I found out so early on. Really the first thing I had to do was to save the church. And I mean really save the church, because once we moved in, we discovered that the structure of the roof, the wooden part, the timber, was the original timber from 1755. It was actually much older because they had not used new wood at the time. They used shipwreck wood, which apparently is much better in a way, because if you keep it in salt, it becomes almost like cement. But still, every few centuries, it's wood. You need to replace it. So we had to, if you look on our website, there are lots of photographs there. The church was, for about 1.5 years, just covered in plastic. That's all we could do until we replaced the structure, the wooden structure, and then we also had to find original, authentic 18th century tiles to re-roof it. So they wouldn't allow you to use modern stone tiles. You have to find tiles from the 1700s, and that takes a lot of time and a lot of money. You basically have to go from church to church, from ruined building to ruined building, from that particular century, and gather as many tiles as they have been able to save, and then you use them on a new building. So at the moment, thank God, the roof is up. The church is, rainproof, weatherproof. We have one of those huge industrial dehumidifiers in the church, and we are supposed to keep it going for 2 or 3 years constantly, although it's extremely expensive as well. But we're supposed to leave it on because that will drain the water from the walls. And in the process of that happening, of course, the plastering on the walls will fall down as well. It's already happening. So at the end of those years, I'll have to take down the plasters and replaster the whole church, replace the floors as well, and only then move in and properly kind of put in an iconostasis and all of that. But at least it was pouring rain inside. that there's no future on an island with a broken roof. That's the first thing that falls. And then, of course, the water seeps in, and then the walls will fall.
I think that's a proverb.
Is there?
There's no future on an island with a...
Oh! Well...
Was this a place of Orthodox worship, surely?
We, the Orthodox Church, we hold everything that happened in the first millennium as being part of our common trunk of Christianity, if you think about it that way. But so from that perspective, yes. The Isles in particular are very special for us, for the Orthodox Church, because of the connection between Irish Christianity and Christianity in Egypt, the Egypt of the Desert Fathers. The first missionaries to the south of Ireland came from Egypt, and they brought with them everything from architecture. Those beehives, the famous igloos that monastics were using, are actually brought from Egypt. Their iconography is brought from Egypt as well. If you look at what's left, the Book of Kells, for instance, and you see the icons that they use in the Book of Kells, and then you compare those with the iconography of the first 3-4 centuries of the Desert Fathers and their Egypt, they're perfectly identical. So for us, there's also that link, that lineage from Orthodox Egypt to the south of Ireland, and then all the saints in the Isles were actually Irish. The first generation were Irish. St. Columba was Irish. St. Brendan, who's the first to found a monastery very close to us, was Irish. St. Kenneth, St. Oran, all of them were Irish. So there is that connection direct to Orthodox spirituality. And at Kilninian, the place where our monastery is, Kilninian means the Church of Ninian. There was a functioning monastic community from either late 500s or early 600s. So it goes straight back to St. Columba's time. It's a beautiful circle in a way. It begins with orthodoxy in the first millennium, and then the Vikings came and erased pretty much what happened there everywhere. And then it moves from being an Orthodox Celtic place into being a Catholic Benedictine monastery. Because 2-3 centuries after the Celts left the monasteries, the Benedictines moved in and they built monasteries over the ruins of the Celtic ones. But that didn't last very long either because of the Blessed Reformation. So when that happened, everything was left into disrepair and abandoned once again. So in some places, like where we are, because at the time there was a local population, those Catholic monasteries were turned into parish churches. And that's why you still have a church standing today there. In other places, the islands were completely abandoned. For instance, the island where St. Brendan lived or St. Kenneth lived, they were completely abandoned after the Reformation. So they just fell into complete ruin, and there's nothing there except the ruins. I mean, you have beehives from the 6th century, but you don't have a functioning church anymore.
I wanted to ask about when you were talking about the monastery fixing up. I've never heard you talk about, are there other monks there already?
No.
So it's still just
So
you?
even the community, so first of all, the community of Iona is not a monastic community. Someone asked me that a bit earlier. The community on Iona is a community of lay people who support their activity on Iona. We, and when I say we, there are two reasons why I use that word. On the one hand, because I trust that God will bless that place. I mean, otherwise, why would he have started this project if his blessing, were to be lifted up at some point? So even maybe in my lifetime, maybe after I'm all long gone, there will be a community there, either a male community or a nuns community. It's completely irrelevant. A monastic is a monastic. But I am part of that. Even if I'm dead and I haven't met them, in person, I am part of that. I've started that place and I've given them a place to pray. And in return, I do hope they'll pray for me, because otherwise I'll come back and I'll haunt them. So there is a we in that sense of a future community, but there is also the we of all the thousands and thousands of people who have offered and sacrificed for this monastery. I mean, I couldn't have done anything without the very practical support of people sending in support, donations. How would I repair the roof? It's impossible, So it would be very proud of me and very presumptuous in a way to say, oh, I've done this on my own. There's an I there. For a while, last year, we had 3 sisters, and they joined the monastery. Our bishop sent them, but things started to go down very quickly after the winter set in. And I always knew that. It's actually quite a serious matter, because the winters there are not harsh because we get, I don't know, snow or it's cold. In Moldavia, for God's sake, we got minus 25 degrees, Celsius degrees, almost every year. We barely get minus 2 or 3 degrees on the island. But it is a very long winter. It can be, 6-7 months, sometimes even longer. It's very dark, it's very humid, it rains all the time. And if you've got the slightest tendency towards depression, it will kill you. It will kill you. And beautiful people turn into just less beautiful people because of depression. And that's, you don't want that. If it's not the place for you, look for another place. There's no reason why monastic life should be a life of sadness and, moping about, complaining about everything. If you need grace, may God bless you, because all I want for everyone is that we are all saved. It doesn't matter where we are. I personally love that. I mean, I love the weather there. I love the weather there. I'm pretty much like a mushroom. I love humid and I love dark. It's perfect for me, and it helps me even physically, because I've suffered from migraine since I was 16. So, the sun is my biggest enemy. It triggers migraines. So the fact that I see the sun every 6 months is actually very helpful.
So is there a criteria, though, for bringing people that you're looking for before they come
I
to
do
it?
believe in, for me, monasticism has been defined in the 4th century by the fathers in Egypt. And their approach was, everybody's welcome. Those who can stay, may God bless you. Because the environment itself will make the selection and the criterion. It's not up to me. Of course, if I discern, for instance, something that I would never allow is someone with a mental problem. Not because I have something against people who have mental problems, but because monastic life is not for someone like that. It is extremely trying, even for someone who is, completely functioning. It can be extremely trying. It's not, again, that romantic vision of a monk or a nun living in complete peace and quiet. It's not real. It's not real. The fact that you are supposed to cut your own will, the fact that every single time you have an initiative, you will be put down purposely for a while or forever. And that's done on purpose. Monasteries are, in a way, monasteries have become something that they were not supposed to be, almost like trying to buy people to come. Oh, if you go to this monastery, you'll be able to do that. If you go to that monastery, you'll be able to, do that. That's not the way monasticism started. You go there because you have no option in your heart. There's no other way you can survive unless you are all alone, entirely given to Christ. There are so many stories of monks and nuns being kicked out of their monasteries for no reason at all, just to try them out. So you would be accused that you've done something, and then the abbot says, okay, we decide you are guilty, and then you're thrown out of the monastery. For no reason, you're completely innocent. And their reaction in those early centuries was to wait for weeks at the gates of the monastery, asking for forgiveness, although they knew they hadn't done anything. Compare that with what we get today.
Hello again. Hope you enjoyed this episode from my interview with Hieromonk Seraphim Aldea. Please let me know what you thought of the video in the comment section below. And please subscribe to be notified when new episodes become available, which happens every Friday. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.